Hey everybody, welcome to the monthly Google Hangout for premium members at the Good Men Project. And we're speaking that you're blessed and highly favored, magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. And Father's Day is around the corner, so we thought we'd have a great roundtable discussion tonight about celebrating fatherhood. And we have guests from the United States and Spain and myself in Toronto, Canada, hosting the Google Plus chat this month. So we'll get right into it. We like to do ladies first, and we have a wonderful lady on our show tonight. So please introduce yourself, Claire.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Claire Thurston, and I've just written a book called The Dad Difference. And it has a double meaning. One is that, of course, dads make a difference, and the second part is that dads are different from moms. And it's my strong feeling that until dads are recognized for being different, that's when the world's going to change, because they're going to have a real reason to be involved in their families' lives, because they're not supposed to be mothers.
Excellent. Next up, after long trying technical challenges, we've got Edward Lawson on the line. Edward, how are you?
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am a little technically challenged, but I'm glad that we can spend this time together. I represent Fathers Incorporated. I serve as the Vice President of Program Operations for Fathers Incorporated. Fathers Incorporated has been in operation for the last 10 years with a vision and mission to really extend the brand of fatherhood, to talk about the importance of fatherhood and raise the level of conversation around fatherhood. We have, 2 years ago, we have the contract, the prime contractor for the Department of Health and Human Services, and we operate the President's Responsible Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative. Since we have other people from other countries, that's the President Obama's Responsible Fatherhood Initiative, and we operate fatherhood.gov, the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, and I serve there as the Community Outreach Coordinator. Really excited about an effort that we have called Fatherhood Buzz, where we go to local barbershops around the country. We have over 250 in this iteration of Fatherhood Buzz. So this Saturday, June 4th, we'll be in 260 barbershops, I believe, across the country in 25 different states, celebrating fatherhood, as you amply put at the top of the show.
Excellent. And second month in a row, really happy to have this gentleman sharing with us from Spain, Graham Reed, Phoenix.
Hi everybody. Hi Dr. Vide. Excuse me. I'm a columnist for Good Men Project, and I'm a men's coach. And I'm on here because I'm a father myself, 2 grown sons in their early 30s, and I've recently become a grandfather now with a 1-year-old grandson. So fatherhood's very important to me, and it's something I've written quite a lot of on Good Men Project is about my own father and my own trials with sort of understanding my father, dealing with issues of anger, to do with frustration with how I was with my father. So I'm very interested in the continuing link between father and son and grandson and great-grandson. I see a movement, a generational movement, which is something that we need to celebrate and we need to cure in some places. But to me, fatherhood is crucial to any man, and having a great male role model is essential to any man in building and growing his masculinity.
Excellent. So let's get right into it and have a really good lively discussion. Why should we be celebrating fatherhood and dads? Because if you look in the media, it's not something that is celebrated. Why should we be celebrating fatherhood in 2014?
Well, I'll give one example. In some of the latest research, they show that dads are really important for empathy development in their children. And what that means is dad's involvement will make the world and all relationships a more peaceful place, because empathy is about getting inside someone else's shoes. And so that's a huge thing to celebrate. I think fathers are really in the position to transform the world.
Graham and Ed?
Yeah, I think fathers are really important to celebrate, because there's a very close physical bond between a particularly a son and his mother, but between a daughter and mother, a very natural physical bond, which is far more common and is very important in those early years of bringing a boy up. But a father's very important for widening out a boy's experience beyond that natural link with the mother. It's very important in having the balance, I think, of several people in someone's upbringing. And I think fathers bring a different view on the world, because I think, like Claire was saying at the beginning, I think fathers and mothers are different. I think men and women are different. And I think fathers bring a different perspective, not a better perspective, but it's a different perspective. And it's important that as we grow up, we have these different views and perspectives. And I think that perspective of a father who doesn't have that obvious physical bond, and the ability for a father to create that physical bond with a child is very important in understanding what's going on.
And I would just add, I'm sorry, with my colleagues, I think the importance of fatherhood is now more than ever being realized. And Claire mentioned some research. The research tells us that dads that are actively engaged in the lives of their children with respect to education, kids do better in school, emotional stability, discipline in school, things of that sort. Girls being more bonded and grounded, and their self-image and self-esteem being built up because of their relationship with their dads. All of these things are now being revealed to us through research. But I think, as Graham mentioned, I think the importance of fatherhood is essential to children's development. I think the reason why we want to celebrate dads is because they're important in the lives of children. And if we can get this part of it right, I think if you look at some of the social ills that plague many of our communities, a lot of them are attributed to, or could be attributed to, the lack of a real father figure, role model, disciplinarian, someone, that Adamo voice that might be able to speak to and into children so that they act and develop as healthy and productive adults. So I think it's critical for not only our children, but our communities and our future for dads to be actively engaged in the lives of their children.
Excellent. Next conversation piece I'd like you to discuss is, Claire, you're not a dad, but I just, for Claire, what are some of the challenges that you hear dads are telling you they're facing? And then for Graham and Ed, who are fathers, what are some of the challenges you face, and also what are some of the challenges that you hear dads telling you that they're facing?
Well, what I hear is dads saying they don't feel like they're important, or they start apologizing before you even start the conversation. I find myself in a situation of saying, wait a minute, you're crucial, and now there's data to back it up. So I think we just have to get to that point where it's not a negative image that men have about being fathers. I would say the word insecurity comes to mind. They don't feel like they're needed, they're important or essential.
Graham and Ed?
Well, sorry, go on, Ed.
So I would agree that they do feel that way, but if we're honest, I think a lot of that feeling and belief comes from systems that traditionally don't really focus on how to engage that in the family paradigm. Many times when we hear social service or human service programs designed for families, it usually speaks to mom and child, and that's important. But we very rarely hear the training or the capacity for organizations and human service providers to understand how to involve dad in the family paradigm is lacking. And so a lot of the work that we do at Father Incorporated and hence through the Clearinghouse is to help organizations build their capacity to better serve dads and meet the need to make those environments, whether it's the school system or whether it's the social service system, more father friendly, so that they don't feel alienated when they are not able to necessarily provide financially for their children, they might understand that there are some other emotional and social needs that they can provide, which don't necessarily equate to money, but show that they have a valid and important interest in the lives of their children.
I think one of the issues that I see is dads finding a way to connect emotionally with the children, and particularly between fathers and sons. I think there's an understanding of a father when he is there, perhaps being a disciplinarian, being a provider, an income provider, etc. But I think a lot of fathers find it difficult to maintain an emotional connection, and I see that particularly. I live in Europe, and I see a lot of the conversation in America, and I see a lot of embarrassment of men actually physically hugging or kissing their sons. And there's a lot of resistance, cultural resistance to that in America, something that happens in Europe quite commonly. I still hug and kiss my boys, even although they're in their early 30s, and I don't feel anything strange about that. And so I think it's often men, when they are there, when they are connected, they're connected in still quite a remote way. And I think a lot of the struggle is finding it publicly acceptable to be more, if you like, intimately connected, to help give that emotional power. Because when a father gives that emotional power to sons or daughters, then they really learn it, and they're able to pass it on to their children, and it grows in the generations that follow.
Great stuff. I want to build on something that Ed had mentioned. A lot of the stuff that Ed had shared with us was talking about society, etc. What about the family unit? Where can the build-up of dads come from the family unit itself, depending on the makeup of the family unit? These days, the family unit is, for lack of a better word, at times a jambalaya, and building up dads may not be a priority. Where can the family unit help in raising and celebrating dads?
Well, I'll start with that one. There's a very famous thing now that's called gatekeeping, where, you know, historically mothers, the only area where they had any power was raising children. So they don't want to give that up. So what they do is they put up a gate and say, well, your father says this. This is who your father is, instead of letting him speak for himself in the family. So, you know, the thing that women can do in the family is to say, let's open the gate, let father speak for himself, and not try and interpret father to the children.
I'd like to jump in. I think that that's an excellent point that Claire raises. And I think the other piece of this work that becomes really critical is conflict resolution, and to be able to to be able to communicate effectively one party to the other party. I always use when I'm presenting, I always use a quote. It's actually an African proverb. It says, "For the sake of the rose, the thorn must be watered too." And I think if we can get people to recognize that the thorn is necessary for the rose to really bloom effectively, and so as if we can communicate men to women, father to mother, I think it helps in the situation of understanding I'm not here necessarily. I want to have a relationship. I want to love and respect you as a mother, but I really want us to love and respect the importance of our child. Our child has certain fundamental rights that they need to be loved by both parents. They need to be cared for by both parents. They need to know that both parents have the same care and love and respect for each other, even if they're not physically together. So even this concept of family, you know, we have to redefine what family looks like, because nowadays there are a lot of families where dad and moms live apart. And so that's a family as well. And so what does that look like? And we have other people involved. So I think this issue of effective communication and conflict resolution becomes very, very vital in trying to deal with the family building up the relationship between dad and children, because they're critical in that situation. Now, let's be real. All of us have conflict resolution issues. All of us have communication issues. I just finished having one with my wife. But the point of the matter is that we have to be able to effectively work through that. And I think that that's a skill set that we all can benefit from. And it's one that we see that is really important in building the capacity of dads to be more engaged in the lives of their children.
But I think I agree with what you're saying, Ed. But I think it's important that the children don't become the vehicle for resolving those conflicts. And one of the problems I think a lot of children have is that they're in these families who are perhaps not together, that the children become the means of resolving it. And I think it's important that the parents, even if they're separated, that they build their own ability to resolve the conflict for the children. To actually help the children, and I think fathers have a very important role in that.
What in regards to what are we not teaching our men today about fatherhood that they're lacking?
I want to jump in first. I think one of the challenges is that we hear this phrase "man up" a lot, but oftentimes what we find in the work that we do is sometimes they don't have the tools, resources, or supports to man up, and because of the culture of manning up, they won't access the services the way maybe a woman might, to find out if there's a resource that might be able to help them to man up or to father up, for lack of a better term. So that's a real challenge because men are fighting this image of man up, or this perception of man up, with this perception of you're not man enough, or you're not father enough. So I think the challenge and what we try to do is to build the capacity of men to understand where they are, understand the things that they do well, and understand that there's a whole spectrum of input that you can have into a child's life. Child support is more than just money. Child support is emotional. It is social. It is being a friend at certain times. It is all those things that Graham mentioned: the hugging, the affection. So all these things have to sometimes not be retaught, but to just bring to remembrance. And then the other challenge is that oftentimes there are a lot of dads who may not have ever had that experience themselves, so they don't have any frame of reference to understand what real fatherhood looks like. And so it's a real challenge, but I think what we're seeing now is more programs, more intentional capacity building for men and fathers. And you see these types of things. You see conflict resolution. You see men accessing resources and supports to help them to do the job of fathering that we all, I think, hope and wish that happens.
I think that last thing that Ed was saying is very important, is that we shouldn't assume that men know what to do or men have the resources, because so often, there's been for the past few decades, there's been a lot of examples of absent fathers not there, and so men haven't learnt from their own fathers as what to do. And I think it's very important to bear that in mind and help men, and not assume that because we're men and because we're strong, we know what to do. I know I learnt as I went along, but I did have a father there to learn from. Whether he was a good father or not is a different conversation, but I knew how to be there and be a father. And so my son has learnt from me how to be a father, and hopefully that's why he's doing it so well.
Claire?
I would just like to say that if from the very beginning, when their boys were little, they got to look forward to being a father. The way little girls play at being a mother, it starts very early, but fathers have to know that they're going to be different than mothers to get excited about it, because this whole term Mr. Mom is something is really awful, because it's saying your dad is not good enough. Dad isn't. It's not Mr. Mom. It's Dad.
Amen, Claire. Amen.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I want to see if I can get a wonderful insight from each one of you. For Claire, is there a moment of celebration that you remember with your father, or from a father that you know that you'd like to share with us? And then with Ed and Graham, either a celebration moment, well, a celebration moment, each of you being a father. So I'll let Claire go first. Is there a story that really touches you when we talk about celebrating dads?
You know, this is going to be a funny one, but when I was little, we had a rope hanging in the backyard, and my father made us all climb that rope, and at the time I hated it, you know, because my little weak arms didn't get very far. But I refer to that image when I've had to struggle through things in life, and that image of climbing the rope just has come back to me over and over again. So I realized there was a lot of wisdom in that.
That's a great story. Ed and Graham, give us one or two celebration moments you've experienced as fathers.
Okay, there's one. There's the one that will always, or two in fact, because I have two sons, that will always stay with me, and that's just immediately after they were born. I was at the birth of each of them and holding them in the palm of my hand, actually holding this little baby for the first time. And then, you know, switching to 35 years later and seeing that little boy now as a grown man with his own little baby, and actually being there with him and his son, and just experiencing him going into that moment that I had, for me, was the best celebration of being a father. And the only other thing is, soon after that, I put together two photographs. I have a photograph of my father and me and my two sons as little children. And then I was able to put next to it a photograph of me, my son, and my grandson. And just seeing those two together, seeing those 4 generations of men, really does a lot for me, and makes me realize how powerful it is to be a father.
For me, I think it's, I can recall, we used to live in an apartment, and I used to call before this is when we had those huge cell phones. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
I used to call when I was pulling into the parking garage. And, you know, it was a big thing. And my kids were just young enough to run to the elevator, like, me, and they would grab both my legs, and I would do the Herman Monster back to our apartment with them both on my legs. That to me was those were the celebrating fatherhood moments that I remember. And also when I had the pleasure of both of my children having to write about who their hero was in younger years, and they both in different situations wrote that I was their hero, and the things that they said. Those are the things that sort of brings, almost even now, tears to my eyes as to. I always want to be my children's hero, and if fathers have and adopt that mindset of, I'm going to do whatever needs to be done so that my children always view me as their hero, I think that would create and that's my goal, to be the hero to my children and to my wife.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful stuff. We have Father's Day coming up. What memories or what would you like to see happen on this Father's Day? Either if you're a father yourself, or corporately, or in the macro, what would you like to see happen on Father's Day and sort of carry on past Father's Day?
Well, I'll start with this one. I mean, I have a kind of vision, once fathers realize how important they are, that they'll want to celebrate together. I would love to see on a Father's Day that you wouldn't just have the nuclear family, but you'd have a lot of families together celebrating Father's Day.
The thing I'd love to see is where children are not with the fathers, aren't able to celebrate with them, is for the sons and daughters to ring their father up, even if they're not used to doing that, and just saying, and just telling them what they meant to them as a father. And I think that to me is a true celebration, is when the children can contact their fathers and say, I love you, and this is what you meant to me, and this is what you mean to me now.
I would say I like the thoughts of both my colleagues, Claire and Graham. I think for me though, I think I would like to see stuff like we're doing with Fatherhood Buzz in the barbershops. I want to be able to identify where men are, where they feel safe, where they trust, where they want to have conversations. Go to those places and engage them in those kinds of conversations. Amen, we want to encourage it to keep going. If there are those guys that are struggling and not knowing how to navigate certain systems or situations or gatekeepers, let's talk about how you do that in a way that's both positive for mom, child, and dad. But so for me, I really like the idea of let's open up this dialogue. Let's continue to raise a level of awareness and importance around involving dad in the family paradigm. And even if we're not romantically together, let's look at the important role that dad can play, and let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate that around Father's Day. So.
Good stuff. I will let Claire and Graham also add, because I was going to finish off with what's your message for our celebrating dads, not only on this Father's Day, but going past this Father's Day. So I'll piggyback on your sort of commandment or sending a message to fathers, Ed, and have also Claire and Graham add on to that.
Well, I would just wish, a feeling of honor, that we honor fathers and respect them in this time where images on the media are of fathers as buffoons and clowns. I just want to turn that on its head and say just the opposite, that we honor and respect you, and that you have a different purpose to play in a child's life, a really important one.
I'd just like to say it's really a message to fathers that if you're wondering what to do, there is one thing that you can do as well as love your children, and that is support them. And that the most powerful thing you can do for your children is to support whatever they do. Don't necessarily weigh in and say, oh no, I would do this, I think you should do that. I think to really give some strength to your children, to help your children trust themselves, show that you trust them and you trust the decisions they're making.
Good messages from everyone on before we go off air tonight. So I'd like to thank each one of you for being on the monthly Google Hangout for premium members for the Good Men Project, and I thank you for your patience. We did get through, as I was saying early on before we got on, and sometimes in order to get through, you got to go through. So we got through it. So before everyone leaves, just like to know how people can connect with you. So first, Claire, how can people connect with yourself?
Yes, I have a website. It's very simple. It's just www.daddifference.com, and I also have a new book out on Amazon, which is called The Dad Difference, and it's celebrating how dads are different and why they matter.
Excellent. Graham?
It's on the screen. You can see below here, GrahamReedPhoenix.com, where you can read what I write for Good Men Project. You can see a radio show I have called Men Alive, and you can contact me about coaching or just anything I do. So hit me up there and let's talk.
And Ed, thank you so much too for contributing tonight. How can people connect with you and the organization?
Fathers Incorporated has a website. It's www.fathersincorporated.com. Both Fathers and Incorporated are spelled out completely. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we operate the National Responsible Father Clearinghouse. If you need any information or about fatherhood in general, no matter what, you can visit www.fatherhood.gov for information there. We're excited about the Fatherhood Buzz effort that is taking place Saturday. And we have a hashtag, and I'm sorry, it's at FatherhoodGov is our Twitter handle, and Facebook, we're FatherhoodGov as well. Visit us on Facebook.
Excellent. Well, thank you, each one of you, for taking time out of your positive, productive schedules to share with us on this month's edition of the Google Plus Hangout for Premium Members on the Good Men Project. I am Dr. Vibe. I'm the host and co-producer of the monthly Google Hangouts. You can actually catch a lot of my shows on the Good Men Project. I have the only show that's featured on only online show that's featured on a regular basis at the Good Men Project. So as always, thank you very much for joining us, and join us again next month. Take care and visit the Good Men Project. We love you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great night.